And we'll just be underway in just a second now. But before I do hand over to the moderator for today, I just want to acknowledge our sponsors. So we want to thank KPMG China and OUE Singapore for being our event sponsors. And you can see there all of our other supporting organizations that are helping us throughout the week. So we're very pleased to have all of those supporting partners for what has been so far a great first day, and the rest of the week we're looking forward to more dialogues. So just have a quick short video from the sponsors, and then we'll get on with today's session topic on family offices. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to now hand over the floor to Miguel Aboitiz, who will be the moderator for today's session on family office and its role in society. Over to you, Miguel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome to Dialogue 3, the role of the Asian family during the post-COVID crisis. I'm Miguel Aboitiz, the moderator for this panel. Most of our distinguished panelists are from family office industry. They are Crystal He, partner and CEO of DL Family Office; Anson Chan, Chairman and CEO of Bond Group of Companies; Vincent Lo, Chairman of Shui On Group; Dixon Wong, the Head of Financial Services and Global Head of Family Office from Invest HK; Anson Chan, CEO of Isola Capital Group; and Lee Wong, Head of Family Services for Asia of Lombard Odier. Vincent, let's start with you. You have a personal experience that highlights the importance and functions of a family office. Can you please share it with us?
Well, thank you, Miguel. Maybe let me just give the audience a very brief background to the family problems. My father founded the Great Eagle Group of Companies. He passed away in 2006. And the business is mainly in properties and in hotels, the Langham Group. And he handed over the reins of the family business to my elder brother, but he's not the eldest brother. He's number 5 in the pecking order. And the family feud actually started in 2017. And thus far, all these legal battles and costing probably close to $300 million already. My father, my parents actually formed a discretionary trust in the 1980s, and they have written a very clear letter of wishes to the trustees. My mother, who's now 102, unfortunately, she's been sequestered by a couple of my siblings, and they have been maneuvering her to write further instructions to the trustee to amend the letter of wishes. Because my father actually did not allocate the shares equally to all the siblings, he was deciding on who is making more contribution to the family and would get more. So I think certain of my siblings are now trying to maneuver my mother to re-instruct the trustees on the allocation. And sadly, you know, it's costing a lot of family problems. and we basically are not in communication anymore. The family is divided into two groups. I am supporting my brother, KS, who's running the family business. But I think the biggest problem was my father, although he was very considerate in his allocations, but he did not envisage that we could go into such problems with all the siblings, right? The very aggressive maneuvers by some of my siblings. And if he had formed a family office at that time, I think the situation would have been better. I've certainly formed a family office now for myself, my own business. And I believe this could help the families to maintain their harmony and hopefully to be able to make progress rather than right now, the family is locked down in legal battles. And it's very, very negative. And maybe that's all I would want to say at this point. Thank you.
Wow, that's a very interesting story. Does anyone have a similar story that they are aware of? No name on a no names basis also that's comparative or just as illustrative? I guess no one. Okay, we'll discuss it perhaps later when we talk about structuring. Crystal, let's start with you. How have some of family offices responded during the start of the pandemic?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Crystal. Thank you, Miguel, and thank you for PBEC for having me here today. And greetings to all the panelists here today. I'll just give a brief introduction of myself and the DL Family Office. I'm from DL Family Office. So we started the family office in Hong Kong back in 2010, and as a multi-family office. So the partners of DLs are from investment bankings and corporate bankings and private bankings. We have office in Hong Kong right now, and Shanghai, Singapore, and San Francisco. DL Family Office is a member of DL Holding Group, which is the Hong Kong member listed company of 1709.HK. And for DL Family Office, we're managing over $1.3 billion assets under discretionary mandate. Coming back from the, for the question that Miguel just raised, I think having gone through the SARS pandemic earlier this century, citizens in Hong Kong are relatively calm in the face of a new coronavirus. So, however, was this initially a sense of panic in terms of how mainstream economy and the financial markets would react. But luckily, family office, among other investors, quickly learned to shift their expectations on both duration and the pandemic, as well as the impact on consumers and investors. So despite COVID-19, since last February, we have seen being engaged in solid investment diversification conversation with several family offices in our care, particularly looking at developing trends such as health, ESG, consumption, to name a few. And of course, speaking, that's the part of the investment side. And in the speaking of the operating of a family office, we're facing a lot of questions on how to continue to perform as a good fiduciary in this challenging and uncertain market. In the past 2 years, this market has been greatly reflected from the unstable pandemic, control, stagflation, rising rates, and the Sino-US relationships. And the communication with our clients and family members are deeply discounted because of the travel policies. So in this post-COVID time, more and more families are looking into the overall risk of management of their assets. And also, and the being interesting things that we've been noticing that the governance of the family office has been also raised as more concern by most of the family office owner or multi-family office, and we as a family office as well. And for the long-term succession came up quite frequently in the past 18 months, with the family leaders looking to not only strengthen the sustainability of their plans for future generations, but also better cement and for their family legacy, to solidifying a family constitution or through a structured philanthropy efforts in carefully selected areas. So I think this outbreak is no doubt a big obstacle, but it's also presented us with opportunity to be more sustainable and forward thinking while we are guarded at present. Yeah.
Okay, does anybody else have an observation or any experience with changes that family offices have made because of the pandemic, at the start of that pandemic?
Yeah, maybe Miguel, I'll just jump in for a second and maybe try to tie a little bit of what Vincent was alluding to. I think what the pandemic has really highlighted to certain families or family office structures is that if they don't have the proper governance structure, especially in relation to the investment mandate, when you have an opportunity such as what happened at the beginning of COVID, when let's say the public markets really took a deep dive, a lot of them who have very rigid structures or mandates from a long time ago didn't have the ability to change their investment mandate and strategies on a flexible basis. So some of them actually completely missed the market. Now, the good thing is a lot of them are extremely wealthy and asset rich, so they didn't necessarily suffer. But it just meant that they missed out on opportunities to deploy into situations where the market momentarily panicked, as Crystal alluded to. At the same time, if you look at what happened, maybe even that on a very opportunistic basis with SPACs in the US, and now that's expanding into certain jurisdictions, including potentially Hong Kong next year. If your mandate doesn't allow you to take that type of exposure, you're not able to participate. So what we're seeing is, especially with the younger family offices, maybe the first, second generation, they are now much more focused on ensuring that apart from having the family office infrastructure, they have flexibility around mandates. So from a governance perspective, whether having the right type of investment professionals at the board level, or depending on what type of structure they use, the investment advisor to the trust, they want to have that flexibility to take advantage of these type of black swan events and changes in the market. And then a final point, which maybe I'll touch on a bit later, is also the emergence of much more accelerated adoption of technologies, right? So the need for diversifying beyond your traditional portfolios that are either very liquid or real asset heavy, and having the right people within the organization to understand how this accelerated technological impact is going to accelerate and how to get exposure to the right sectors. So those are some of the observations we've seen in the recent 12, 18 months.
Thank you for sharing that, Anthony. Has anyone seen family offices provide donations or any kind of support for coping with the COVID crisis? None? Okay. What about investing in companies that are coping in COVID crisis?
Miguel, hi, Lee here. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. You mentioned about donations. Yes.
Yes.
At my end, we've seen some families giving donations to support various causes throughout the COVID crisis. So a little bit of introduction. I don't deal with the investment side at Lombard Odier. I'm the head of family services, so I deal with the softer issues and the families and more the advisory side of things. So we have actually seen clients who feel that they should contribute to the environment that they are in, the society that they're in. And some of them have actually, like for example, in Singapore, they have supported donations for meals to children that are stuck at homes. We have lower income families where these children get sort of support for meals in school. But when the country went into lockdown, all these kids are at home, and some of these low income families have quite large families. So suddenly the parents are feeding 4 to 5 kids in their homes for 2 meals a day, when in the past they have coupons of which they were getting meals in school. So we've seen some families actually organize these meals to be sent to the house so that the families can actually have a comfortable meal at home. And the other thing that we also realized in the course of the COVID period was that some low-income families do not get access to technology. When they were supposed to be doing their home-based learning, they actually don't have Wi-Fi. And they don't have enough computer equipment in the house. So some families, if they do have a computer, they have one that's shared amongst a family of 5 or 6. But in the past, because their parents were working in the office and the children were all in school, it was actually okay for them to share one. So when they have 4 or 5 kids actually doing home-based learning at home, and the parents are actually being sent home to work, they don't have enough equipment. So some families have actually provided laptops to those kids, as well as toggles for them to get access to Wi-Fi. So I thought that has very nice projects that some families have been involved in.
Oh, that's great. That's really fantastic. Does anybody else want to share similar stories of support provided? Otherwise, I'd like to ask, has anybody seen family offices invest in companies that have responded to the crisis? Companies like Moderna, Pfizer, other companies like that.
Yeah, Miguel, I mean, some of the companies you just mentioned are publicly listed. So obviously, I think a lot of family offices, especially if they've got professional help, either internally or externally, would have redirected some resources towards the healthcare space, in particular, those companies that you mentioned that have the ability to deliver solutions to tackle the pandemic, whether it's now or going forward. Obviously, there's also a lot of focus in terms of health tech, med tech, other healthcare technologies, because as we all understand, apart from climate change impact, there is also an aging global population that's growing also at the same time quite rapidly. So there is a need for deployment of capital intelligently into the healthcare sector, whether it's in the services space, the pharmaceutical space, and also medical device space. So certainly, I think a lot of family offices already have allocation to that sector or those sectors, and probably will continue that.
What about private investment? Investments in non-public companies, direct investments into these companies that responded to the pandemic. Have you seen any of that?
Sure. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of tech companies, health tech, med tech, biotech companies. They're actually private, a lot of them. And a lot of them are developing solutions that are not even approved. So for example, in the US context, they may not have gone through the clinical trials, to get, approval, for launching that product or pharmaceutical product, or they haven't got a CE mark in Europe to launch that product. So definitely within the private space, in the alternative space, there are verticals that relate to healthcare and biotech that a lot of family offices and private investors have deployed into and will continue to deploy into.
Okay. Anson, after having gone through this pandemic, do you expect family offices to make changes in their structure and the way they operate?
I think we have to be careful about defining what a family office is. So, for instance, there are some family offices that have a more formal structure. In our case, it's less of a formal structure. We have a family unit trust and a private trustee company. So we're quite flexible in terms of the mandates that we pursue. And so, for instance, our family recently purchased from the Royal Society in England an estate called Chichley Hall, which was refurbished by the Royal Society, but then they lost a patron, so they had to sell. And we bought it at the price the Royal Society paid for it in 2007. So that was a very good purchase. But things like that can only happen, I think, once in a while. In the case of a pandemic where strange things happen, things like the Royal Society, you do not expect to be forced to sell valuable real estate holdings in the middle of a pandemic. But then they lost a patron. And that's what happened. So I think flexibility is key, and that there's a lot of talk about the new economy, but of course the old economy is where we all live, and we still have to live in apartments. Right. We still have to go on holidays, have wedding venues, go out to eat. And, of course, there's cyber, blockchain, online e-commerce, medical technology that could make people live to 200 years old, may all be around the corner. But let's not all forget the traditional economy where there are still opportunities.
Well, you brought up a very interesting point. Would anybody like to comment and compare the difference between a unit trust and a family office in terms of structure and what it can do, what each can do?
Well, perhaps Chris can shed light on that. I'm no legal expert.
Hi, Lee. Anthony, would you like to go first? You have something to say?
No, I was going to make maybe a more general comment, and maybe Lee, I'll let you and Crystal dive into details. The trust is just one of many structures that you can utilize, and obviously, without going too deep, trusts don't always work in certain jurisdictions, right? Depending on whether it's a common law, civil law jurisdiction. So I don't want to also dive into that, but I think what you can think about is with a family office infrastructure, you can employ all types of structures. You can have, offshore corporate structures, maybe a Cayman SPC with a lot of SPs underneath to invest in different private investment opportunities. You can create a corporate structure where you actually create boards that have corporate governance mandates that are set, with objectives and milestones that they need to hit and KPIs, right? Obviously, there are more complex structures that are, like private placement, life insurance, PPLIs, that allow you to set up structures that perpetuate for many generations. So there's no general simple answer. I think the whole idea of a family office and somebody or a family that can afford to set up a proper family office, you would have something quite bespoke, right? There is nothing that's turnkey per se that you can actually just plug everyone into. But one comment I would make, and I'll hand it over to Lee and Crystal, is it's also about finding the right talent. You could have all the thought process around, I can afford this infrastructure, I can set up all these different vehicles or legal structures, but do you have the right people to run this? And simply hiring very talented bankers, lawyers, accountants, and putting them together is not going to do it, because there are egos in place, and if these people are top performers, they're not going to leave, a global top tier institution running billions of dollars of assets to join a much smaller entity where they may have to respond to, some at a personal level, what the family's desires are. So I think it's one thing to talk about how family offices can respond. It's another to actually execute that. So I'll just pause there and see if my colleagues on the panel want to contribute more.
Okay, so back to the question of the difference between a unit trust and a family office and which is better. And I think Anthony has covered that very well from the perspective that they all serve different purposes and depends on the family. For me, when I look at the unit trust, it is actually a succession tool. The family office, on the other hand, is an operational tool. The family office is like your gatekeeper. It helps you to execute whether it is your investment function, organizing the family, your governance function. So it is basically, as Anthony said, you need good people who is within this framework that's going to support the family to achieve certain objectives, target objectives. The unit trust, on the other hand, is just one of many tools that you use to structure your succession. So if you're in a common law jurisdiction, you can use a discretionary trust, unit trust, and in the trust world, you could go a Cayman Star Trust, BVI Vista Trust, the list goes on. So unit trust is just one of those. And if you are in a civil law jurisdiction where trust is not recognized, as Anthony has very astutely pointed out, then you might need a PPLI, you might need an insurance tool, you might need a combination of that with the foundation, a variety of properly drafted shareholders agreement if you have forced heirship. So I think a lot of times people mix up the succession element with the element of what I need to put in place in order for my family to function properly. A large family might require both. You might need a succession vehicle to pass the ownership of your assets appropriately to the right people so that the right people benefit it. But the control function needs to be with a group of people with the right qualities and the right abilities to manage the family assets. So I see it as sort of organizing appropriately to split the benefit and control within the family so that the right people get access and the right people are managing it for the benefit and prosperity of all. Okay, Crystal, I pass it to you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Yes. I think for a family office setup, we usually start with the family's charter with the rules and the guiding principles and the true value of a family, if we will. And family members nominate a board to manage the family office and assets and affairs under this structure. The typical function of family office, usually we start it including the investment and advisory, compliance and operation, finance and administration. And for multi-family office, we usually have a current service team to serve the multiple families' needs. and also take care of different, the needs from the family and looking for new business. I think your investment management majorly is the heart of the family office, and the trust definitely is a part of the very important tool during the whole succession planning. And a full developed family office can provide a number of other services, including succession planning, residence planning, tax strategy, next generation education, philanthropy, etc. And from the, from our experience, usually the service are coming to 4 pillars, 4 parts. That is financial planning, strategy, governance, and advisory. So like for investment management service, usually the main reason for setting up a family office is essential. It's essential to ensure the wealth preservation. And the family office also involved in the business succession, legacy planning, enable the transfer of the family, the wealth to the next generation. And beyond asset advisory, family office can provide advisory solutions on the finance and business promotion. And also there are administration services and risk management and insurance service that to assume like a more important role in the recent years. And that there's a tax and legal advisory always being essential for the wealth planning, preservations. So I think, yes, the unit trust definitely is one of the important tools for in the family office setup, and that's we're coming from more services to surround the core needs for with the development of the family. And I think Vincent just mentioned in the first talk, like a trust doesn't just serve the whole purpose and just a key or a one-time answer to face all the issues within the development of the family. They definitely need more governance and updating the development, how we see how the needs are driven by the new family members, and also complying with the new needs and the tax and the legal requests from along with the generations. So there's a lot of things we are doing within the family office and the structure. And I also want to share some interesting figures that we observed over the years. Like I think in Asia, the family office numbers was started. I think most of family office started in 2010, and the numbers for family office also increased by 8-fold in the past 10 years. And it's for 2020, there's we see a report from Bain that like in China mainland, there's about 2,000 to 3,000 family office already. And for the investable asset for the wealthy people, that reaches 21.2 trillion US dollars, and about 100,000 families with average assets with 20,000 US dollars. So there's a huge number of the demand for wealth management, and typically, there's some more demands that flow into the family office. And also we noticed in the past 2 years, there's a lot of family office disappeared, and there's a lot of players come and go. So that's why I also anchored to a lot of, I think Anthony also mentioned for how we structure the family office, and we see definitely the sustainability to mitigate the risk running the family office itself is very important by helping the risk management with the family, and the risk management of the family office itself is also, we see it's becoming more important when we trying to see when you see there's developing in this industry as well. The things that we mentioned about like the digital platform setup and the cyber risk and talents, how we have this development with talent, with the succession planning for the key man risk within the firm. That's also something that we're looking at as well. Yeah.
Okay. And
Miguel, can I talk a bit about the my family problems? I mentioned that if we had the family office, the problem might not be as severe, or it might have been it might not happen. I think the big problem is we now have almost 100 people in the 4 generations, and just to try and organize some family activities or gathering, it's not so easy. And who's going to do it, right? Usually we would go to my parents' house for dinner on Sunday, but that's just one dinner. But how do you actually get the whole family together, right? To sort of embrace that harmony within the family. So it sort of become very, very difficult. And if we had the family office, it's not just trying to deal with the family relations. It's actually also maybe administering my father's letter of wishes so that it's adhered to, rather than leaving it to the trustee who just try to remain impartial and do not want to take activities or take sides with anybody. That might not work. So I think for myself now, I'm setting up the family office. I'm working with my 2 children as to exactly what the family office will the role of the family office. I believe in professional management, right? We have a small family now, but going forward, looking at my bigger family, the issues are very, very complex and complicated. And so how do you deal with all that? So I just want to share some of my issues and problems.
Well, we have the experts here. Lee, how do you deal with all that?
Well, it's a, how do you say this? This is a very difficult, but at the same time, common issue that we see amongst families. I'm glad that Vincent brought this up, and he's been so open to share with people about the issues that arise within families. And as he's rightly put, the ownership structuring alone by itself does not really work, especially when families get larger and larger. And Crystal has also mentioned about the charters and putting a governance framework in place. So we often advise families to come together to work through their value systems, to think about what brings them together as a family, because as you sort of move from one generation to the next, and as Vincent has shared, you will get quite a number of family members. If you do not have an aligned value system, you do not have protocols and policies in place in relation to what is an entitlement within the family for family members to be reasonable to expect, and you don't put fairness in context in relation to how you treat one another, then you will have corridor conversations. You would have people who feel that they've been unfairly treated, and they will not align with whatever aspirations has been put in place by the older generation in relation to succession. So having that safe space for people to express their point of view, to be able to resolve the issues that arise in the family. And naturally, when you put a group of family members, any human individuals are going to have their individual point of view. The issue is to allow them an arena for them to express it and to have a safe environment for people to be able to resolve it appropriately. So having a family office to allow people to find a way to organize and deal with some of these issues in a sensible and disciplined fashion will reduce a lot of unnecessary disputes that builds up to a point where, you know, people are just not willing to come together to the table again. So I think it's about doing the things as Vincent's family is doing, to come together, then work through some of the issues to build a family office that's built to last, as Crystal has also mentioned earlier. And I think Crystal and Anthony come from very professional background, and a lot of the family offices that they serve have a good pair of hands to help them to construct it appropriately right from the onset. And I think Crystal also shared some numbers earlier. In Singapore, we also see a lot of that. I think down here, the number of family offices that has grown has increased by 5 times, and there is a large drive for people to just sort of build their own family offices. And obviously, the tax incentives that the government had attracted families to come in, and the fact that the pandemic has created healthcare issues also make families start to wonder, where should I go to, where I can get a good healthcare system, where can I go to that's politically stable. So we did see a fair number of family offices coming into being pre-COVID and a lot during the COVID period. So it has been a very busy time around here for the creation of family offices. But the problem that we see here is, unlike the family offices that Anthony mentioned earlier, where they should move towards giving more flexibility, having a governance framework that allows them to capitalize on the opportunities that they see during the pandemic. What we saw were family offices that came into being without much form and structure. They didn't have the crystals of the world as asking them to look at the governance and the charters and everything. They just came into being because they really wanted to come into the country quick and fast. And they are set up very lean. We've seen some family offices with maybe only 3 persons, and out of the 3 persons, only 1 is a professional, the other 2 are family members. So we've seen family offices created whereby individual family members were taking care of various banking relationships, and then these banking relationships was shifted into the structure of the family office, but the same individuals were still dealing with their favorite bankers with investments in their own favorite way. So that whole concept of professionalizing their family office was a little bit missing, but bam, when the pandemic hit, then it really got them to start to think about the fact that, we need to corporatize our structure a little bit. We need to put some corporate governance framework into the picture. We need to think about our business continuity plan. We need to think about risk management, because after all, we are going to be the gatekeepers now and for the future for the assets shared by the family. We cannot have an individualistic centric way of making decisions. So a lot of them have very informal decision-making grids. There's 1 or 2 key people that's making all the decisions. And then when this healthcare crisis came, they realized that we need to think through this a little bit. So if this person is not able to make decisions, who is he deputizing it to? How do we make sure that things can continue running? So they start to sort of think about professionalizing their family office in relation to the investment decision-making process, as Anthony alluded to earlier, to think about putting an investment committee in place. So when certain people are not available to make decisions, how do other people come in to fill those positions? What are the criteria that we require in relation to people who are qualified to make those decisions? Should we start letting professionals come in? An investment review process, which is more regular and which is more disciplined, getting professionals to support us so that we can understand and be a little bit more equipped to deal with the uncertainty and the volatility in the markets. And as Anthony said, to capitalize on opportunities where we need to, and to make adjustments where we feel that we want to mitigate our risk, to start looking at our total assets from a risk-reward basis, instead of each and one of us investing in our own way and not being able to see where is our total risk exposure in relation to geography, in relation to asset classes, and what kind of a target return are we looking for? Putting an investment policy in place so that the family understand what is my investment philosophy, what are our investment objectives in relation to lifestyle drivers, in relation to legacy intentions. How many family members do we need to feed? So like Vincent's larger family, if I've got 100 family members to feed, the way I deal with my investments need to be more deliberate. What kind of legacy intentions do I need to deal with? So what are the larger chunks of distributions that I foresee in the future? So I need to push my assets to grow with a longer time horizon. So to have that sort of more organized and disciplined approach to think about a 50-year, 100-year time horizon, instead of individually doing their own things and sort of hopefully they're all aligned and individually looking at their risk return in terms of a small portfolio basis rather than a larger, unified family office basis. When we look at risk management, I think Crystal has shared quite a fair bit earlier as well in relation to data security. And now that everybody may not be able to see each other as often as they used to, and we might not be able to come to a dinner table to make our investment decisions, how do we get remote access to private data in a secured fashion? How do we ensure that our cybersecurity risk is taken care of so that we can protect the information and assets of the family office? When we look at our investment risk, how are we thinking through our liabilities in terms of the credit that we are deploying? What is our risk matrix like? So a lot of that risk and corporatizing our investment decision-making process and review process, we see families starting to take that more seriously as a result of the pandemic, which I think is a positive driver. And more of the professionals such as Anthony and Crystal can come into the picture to support family offices to think about, how do I make sure my family office is more robust and more equipped to deal with future pandemics, future issues, hire appropriately, to have more professionals supporting me, and to work with other professionals from a virtual network basis to ensure that my family office is robust and resilient.
Okay.
He
you
has
brought up
put everything in perspective, but let me share what
Okay.
I'm trying to do to put that into practice. In my own small family, I'm now writing a family constitution, basically covering exactly what Lee was setting out, right? Providing the guidelines of how the family members should behave, how we should invest, how we form a family council, a business council to deal with all these issues. So I just want to share what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I think the family constitution is the very first thing most families do. It sets out everything.
But it's
Anthony,
not easy to get agreement on it.
Right, that's correct. But usually when the head of the family is alive, he sets it. And the only thing, and everybody has to follow, because that's really he writes the constitution.
Maybe Miguel, I can
Anthony-
share one story, maybe just to help, maybe just sharing, right? So we deal with some 4th to 6th generation families in Europe and one in particular in Southeast Asia. So I won't mention the countries, but maybe what they're doing is quite interesting. So the one in Southeast Asia, they've got a very established investment portfolio that generates quite a large distribution annually. But similar to yourself, Vincent, this family already has over 100 people within their 4 generations, and they do need to find ways to include them in the family office infrastructure. So what they've done, which I thought was quite intelligent, was they split basically the pot in half of it in a foundation, half of it in a more investment-focused family office structure. So for the family members that have the requisite knowledge or training or aptitude, so maybe they were trained as bankers, lawyers, investment professionals who want to participate, they would be elected on a rotational basis to a board on the family office investment committee side, but they hire external professionals to actually execute. And the rationale for that is there is no need for the families to fight with each other. If you hire professionals, they're held accountable. There's transparency, there's reporting. If they don't perform, you can get rid of them. So it's a very neat way to solve one side of the problem. The other side of the problem is, what if you have all these 3rd, 4th generation or future generations who don't have a particular desire to be involved in the family office on the investment side because they're afraid of being blamed, right, for underperforming. They don't want to get into contentious arguments with other distant cousins or family members. So on the foundation side, what they did was they found, I think it's over 100 different charitable or philanthropic causes. So if your future generations are studying, and I'm using this not in a discriminatory, but let's say they study music, right, or ballet, and they probably are not qualified to do investments, but they want to participate. So in order to be involved, because these 100 or so charitable causes are part of a selection that the family members made, they would sit on multiple boards of these charities. So they are still contributing, right, to the legacy of the family, the social impact, the ESG components that the family future generations want to participate in. And because they sit on these boards, they are, involved, they're engaged, they're contributing, they're actually earning an income, and hopefully over time they develop passions. So I think that's one example we've seen that's worked really well for multi-generational family offices, but it does require, the earlier generations to have that foresight. So Vincent, I guess in the context of your own family office, you've certainly got that foresight. You've seen the issues that have arisen from your father's setup, and now you've set that up.
Yeah, Anthony, thank you for your compliment, because I've recognized that it's next to impossible for my bigger family today with 100 members to try and agree on a common principle. That's why I'm starting early with my own family in writing that constitution so that we can get everybody along the same direction and the same values, so that in future generations, I'm also expecting them to sign and subscribe to the family constitution. They need not sign if they don't want to, but we want them to commit themselves and say, this is what are the values of our family. Sure. And adhere to the family constitution so that we can move on. And hopefully the family assets or the family legacies will be perpetual.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's very good. And one other quick contrast that I mentioned earlier for the European family, and I think this is because the future generations are now fifth, sixth generation, they live in different countries. It's very hard for them to participate in the type of structure I mentioned for the Southeast Asian family. So what two of these families have done is they've actually created a holding company that's listed on the European exchange. And obviously, how they divided originally into the shares, I can't comment on, but let's just say it also facilitates and provides a solution for future generations who say, I would like to take some capital off the table. I want to cash out and do what I want to do. That's a very neat way to achieve that solution without anybody fighting over, how to treat the underlying assets. So they still have a professional family office running the investment portfolio, the legacy, the philanthropy. But if you want to exit your exposure to it, because it's listed, you can do that. Otherwise, if you want to just sit there and collect the annual distribution, that's also a very neat way to do it, because there is no need to fight about how much you distribute, because everyone will get a pro rata of that distribution. So I just wanted to quickly contrast how some of the multi-generational family offices have done it in Asia and also in Europe.
Okay, that's very interesting. I have a follow-up question to that, Anthony. There's a family I know in Europe. It's very public. The criticism they received is that the family that has a lot of influence because they own a lot of shares of the company, and the ones who receive the dividend shares are not working in the company. And there's a lot of pressure from those people to maximize the dividends they receive. And yet, since none of them works in the company, they don't look at it from the company's point of view about requiring more capital to invest for the future generation of the business. And so there's a huge tension between the family and the management. And given that most of the family is not involved in the business, they sit in the boardroom and they just say, I want more dividends. And thinking of themselves, they're not thinking of the next generation. They're just thinking of their next 20 or 30 years. And I'm referring to the Quant family. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, BMW. Yeah, no,
BMW.
Yeah, we know the BMW. Yeah, so look, I think my quick comment, and maybe Crystal, you got something to add to this. My quick comment would be, that's why you need professionals, right? That are operating the business. You need independent directors on the board who understand that if the families want to continue to benefit from the corporate entity and the distributions, it needs to be sustainable. So in order to be sustainable, you need to invest in that particular company structure or platform's future. So if all you're doing is distributing everything out and not reinvesting, then obviously at some point, it's no longer a sustainable business. I guess the issue would be also how large a component that portfolio is in real estate, because real estate with the right construction, both geographically in terms of core plus and how big a portion that is, could always generate a very steady cash flow stream to sustain high distribution. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to depend on the type of professionals you have in place, what type of mandate they're given, and whether the board members understand the need for sustainability. Yeah.
Lee, in terms of professionalizing the family office, there are a lot of people listening here who don't have family offices and are now educated by us on the benefits of the family office. But I think the big question in their mind is, how much does it cost to establish a family office? How much of a critical mass of assets do I need to be able to support a family office?
So that is how do you say it? It's not an easy question to answer. As I said, there are family offices that we've seen set up here in Singapore. They're very, very lean. So you don't need a great deal of assets. But personally, as I shared earlier on, I believe a more professional structure where you've hired the right people, you've put in the right infrastructure in place is better for the long run. So generally speaking, I think families should have about 100 to 200 million as a minimum, to set up a family office if they really want to set up a family office really well. If let's say they're starting off with say 50 million, I personally think that it's better to work with professionals, such as institutions like Anthony's side and Crystal's side, to sort of help them to sort of support the investment management first, and then slowly over time build the critical mass to do it themselves well. A lot of clients just rush into building a single family office. They incorporate a company. They don't get any external support. Yeah, you can do that with 20 to 50 million, and you pay one particular person, and your family members just sort of have what the credit cards that they normally get. You don't really pay them a proper full salary, so you don't even get the good family members, with the right intellectual property to come and leave Goldman Sachs and work for the family office properly. So I think that way is not great. So personally, I think if you have 100, 200 million upwards, then you realize that the return that you're going to generate properly when you have a proper setup makes sense for you to invest to build a proper infrastructure. Then you operate on that basis, and you calculate a percentage of your cost that's going to go into sort of maintaining the setup well.
And so if I had a $100 million asset base, what would the percentage of cost be for running it every year?
Generally speaking, at a high end, most people would take the view that's about 1%. Usually it is less, but it's just that it gives them a comfort level that if I budget 1% of my cost, is it something that 1% of my AUM, is that something that I am willing to stomach? Then whatever you actually end up incurring, generally speaking, you manage it well, is normally less than that. But at least it gives yourself a benchmark to consider. If I think 1% of my asset under management is a little bit much for me to stomach, maybe you might want to see what services can I work with in externals. Perhaps when I look at my asset consolidation platform, maybe I work with an institution with that platform. I hire the right professionals to support the main functions I need them to do. The other aspects, I try to collaborate with other external professionals so that I bring my costs down to a level which is beneath this amount, and then I can start small and I will slowly scale up.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah. Oh, I can give. Yeah. I think on the general report is saying, I think from average size of the family office, especially in the Western and US and Europe, it's roughly around $800 million. Back in Asia, it's a bit lower than the numbers. It's I think from the research, it's between $300 to $500 million. And for the cost running a family office depends on the size of asset under management, just as Lee said. It's typically range from like 35 to 52 basis points, but that's in term. I mean, that depends on the size of the AUM. For $100 million, I think 1% is something we can expect it. And also, besides the cost of investment related activities, there are also costs for family professional services, including the family governance, succession planning, administration services, and general advisory services, etc. So I think that's why for the assets, really, it's not really like more essential than, if you don't really own a substantial asset and trying to form your own single family office, the cost is which will be expected to be a little bit higher than a multi-family office. So that's why I think there's some more multi-family office in Asia right now. And I think there's come back to the topics we just discussed. I do see there's a lot of trend for forming more family office in Asia right now. But when we look back in the Western, so most of the multi-family office, they're coming back from the successful running of a single family office. So there's a change during the process of updating for when they manage the family wealth. And there's for example, for like Rockefeller, their family, and the Bessemer Trust, and the Mellons, DuPont, Nortons, they were all single family office. And for Bessemer Trust, they actually formed in 1907 as a single family trust. Yeah. And it's a partner of Andrew Carnegie established Bessemer Trust, and it is Henry Phipps that was the founder. And after 70 years, they're running their own single family office. Then they opened to a multi-family office. Then now they are aggregating the assets under management. It's over $100 billion with the number of, so we got from 2019, and they serve like more than 2,500 clients relationships around 19 offices globally. And so with the development of the family office, I think there's a lot of needs for high net worth. They're looking for professional services, and they realizing that when they come together, they have some better governance or a better interest of the wealth owners. So I think that's also very important for a family office to run, to sustain in the market as well. And I think for how to set up the regulatory environment and the jurisdiction for family office is also very important when we come into how to set up a family office. And also that like for Singapore, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, they introduced a license exception regime to the eligible family office in 2019. And also for Hong Kong, they issue in June 2021, Invest Hong Kong also set up a dedicated team to promote Hong Kong as a hub of family office, and more tax benefits are expected to come along. And I think that's why the most of family office, when it comes to Asia, there's the two locations, two jurisdictions become very popular when people are talking about how to setting up their family office. And also very important when we're talking about this investment governance. I think that's also Vincent and Anthony was mentioned about like the investment process, including consideration of the legacy, objective setting, mapping risk tolerance, building up a portfolio structure and process across liquid and illiquid assets, and use the strategic and the tactical investment tools to ensure the investment solutions that fit the objectives of meet the cash flow needs and the governance. And also, and there's a lot of new investment ideas about EFG and ESG and impact in investment strategy. And also for family office, that's the technology plays a more and more important role in creating efficient family office. I think coming from a China, we have a more China client base. Most of the clients that we're meeting are the first and second generation. They don't have a multi-generation needs right now, and they're not facing multiple families or more children to incoming in. When you're setting up the beneficiary in the trust. But we also discussed with a lot of mature family office when based in Southeast Asia, when they're facing their beneficiary are actually scattered all around the world. When it comes to annual meeting, it's very difficult to reach out to everybody and to organize a family meetings or reportings. And the technology really comes into a very important role in this kind of setting. And for a single family office or a relatively smaller family office, it's hard to digest the cost and also how to balance with the investment technology and the risk and information cyber risk, and between the operating cost with the family office. So that's the place that I also consider when we structure a family office. So that's why sometimes multi-family office becomes more efficient when we are facing those type of questions. And also the business continual planning with continuity plan with the talents and how to structure the instead of just keep a basic maintenance and a staff administration. Do we need to keep seeking the professional assistance, guidance, and structuring the recruitment process and formulating compensation and incentive package? Because the family are growing and we're trying to really cast down in a message through the generations. That's why the sustainable development or the family office is pretty important in this sense as well.
Okay, you touched a very interesting subject to locate your family office. Dixon, you're very much involved with promoting family offices to locate in Hong Kong. What support does Hong Kong provide for establishing family offices?
Thank you. I think there are many family office experts and also the operators like Vincent, Anthony, Crystal, and from bank's perspective, Lee. We've been talking about family constitution, family office, trust, as well as how to professionalize the family office. I think these are all great. And I would like just to highlight a few key points in respect. Crystal has highlighted Invest Hong Kong has recently set up a new family office team. But in short, I think actually Hong Kong has the element and also what called the DNA as a comprehensive international financial center. And one thing to highlight is the importance of family office being an endurable is important because families are built to last for forever, for as many years as possible. And on that front, Hong Kong has exhibit similar qualities as being highly resilient and also versatile. So as a family, as a sophisticated financial hub, Hong Kong has the very, all of us, we know the robust legal system, the low and simple tax structure, and also one of the world's freest economies. So the strategic location, which is so close to, as part of the GBA, we call it Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, connects the city seamlessly with the robust growth engine. and the rest of the world. So I think also talk about the how the support from Hong Kong government, in particular this space. The Chief Executive Hong Kong SAR government announced in the policy address 2020 and also 2021 to support family office from around the world to set up a presence in Hong Kong. So Invest Hong Kong, which is part of the government unit within the overall government structure, has step up the promotion efforts. And also recently, over a few last few, I think in June, end of June, set up a dedicated family office team here at Invest Hong Kong. The team is a more strategic initiative supported by the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau, and works in conjunction with regulators and industry stakeholders, all the family offices in the industry as well as the regulators. So we have 5 specialists executives located in Hong Kong, and another 3, sorry, another 2 based in mainland, one in Guangzhou, one in Beijing, and the last one in Brussels. So working with Invest Hong Kong's network of 32 offices globally, offer bespoke support and also tailor solutions to potential family office investors who would like to set up the presence in Hong Kong. So that's our overall objective. And in terms of other measures, for example, the collaboration with Hong Kong MA and also FSDC, we have a holistic marketing and promotional campaigns. In terms of licensing, I think SFC has recently made a very clear clarification on the guidelines, excuse me, on the licensing responsibilities through circulars and FAQs. So including the situation where they need to apply for a license under the circular, excuse me. So I think, apart from the licensing, the collaboration with the industry stakeholders, as well as the recent Invest Hong Kong setup of the new team. So we are also providing an investment opportunity platform, sort of, helping the family office in Hong Kong to grow, to invest through some of the collaboration with Consulate General here in Hong Kong to find out opportunities elsewhere outside Hong Kong, for example, Israel and any other parts of the world. We provide a sort of a venue or platform to help the family office in Hong Kong to grow and invest out of Hong Kong. This is a very, I think in December we will have one, but we will do more of this in collaboration with other industry stakeholders. I think, well, our aim is to provide, customized services and also one-stop services to potential family office to set up in Hong Kong, including licensing, work visas, PR, and marketing publicity. Our services are customized and also at no cost. So our aim is to position Hong Kong as a leading family office hub in Asia. So I pause here.
Okay, thank you. We've received. I was going to do this just after Dixon talk. I was going to say that anybody who has a question to ask can do it using the Q&A facility on the bottom right of your screen. I'm talking to the audience now. Even before having said that, we already have 4 questions. One question is, have you seen increases during the pandemic of new family office? Does anyone want to take that question?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think in Singapore here, we have been seeing an increase in activity. Crystal mentioned just now about the incentives, just like Dixon has shared earlier, Hong Kong and Singapore, they both have a regulatory authorities that have put in place tax incentives, as well as a legal framework to make it easy for families to come into Singapore to set up family offices where licensing is exempted, so it's very easy to set up. And from a tax perspective, when they have tax exemption for assets that are managed by the family office, it can be quite attractive for some clients who are looking to move into Singapore, live in Singapore, and to sort of have their pool of assets invested in a tax favorable environment. So during the pandemic, we have seen quite a number of clients looking to set up family offices out here. They come from various places, places like Indonesia, even South Korea, some from China, Taiwan. There were quite a number of queries from Taiwan, one or two from Hong Kong as well. Around Southeast Asia, we do see a number of families looking to explore different locations. At my end, my team covers Singapore, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. So where they want to set up family offices, they don't need to be here. They can be setting up family offices in Hong Kong as well. We also have seen some families looking to sort of relocate to places like Australia or New Zealand. But the increase in thinking through setting up family offices, we have actually seen quite a lot of that activity going on in the past 2 years.
Okay, and another question from the chat group is, what qualifications does a family office professional need?
It's a fairly interesting one. Maybe I'll let Anthony say first because he's got a professional view on it.
Well, I guess first of all, there's no one particular mold, right, or individual. I think like any corporate entity, it's going to comprise a range of positions that you need to fill. So, you're going to need some sort of CEO, you're going to need somebody in charge of, all the financial and accounting operations. So you need a CFO type function. You definitely need a CIO if you want to deploy your own asset management portfolio strategy. So I think the way to think about it is you need to basically create a corporate entity that would have all the traditional functions for an asset management company. And if you want to go beyond that and build a legacy or philanthropic or social impact type of stuff, then you need to also bring in that talent who understands how to deliver that. So maybe a decade ago, we would be talking about a CSR officer. Today, it would be somebody who's familiar with all the ESG components. So it can grow a lot, but I think suffice to say, there's a lot of opportunity for people who want to move into the family office space. But very often these will be people who are professionals that are already in industries or sectors adjacent to what a family office would need in terms of infrastructure.
So to add to that, so on two fronts, I think when I work with families, I typically ask them to consider what kind of families office they're trying to build at the onset and over a period of time. So what are your immediate priorities versus what are your longer term priorities? Because let's face it, a lot of families who are trying to set up family offices, they might want to bring this into being, but they may not be that ready to put all those various professionals into the family office right at the onset. As Anthony has shared, actually there are a lot of different functions that you need to comprise within your family office to be able to do it really well. So on the basis of what they think are their short-term immediate priorities, then we ask them to look within the family and say, what kind of expertise do you think you have? What can you internalize? And then what do you need to bring on board because you lack certain functions which you deem important to be kept in-house? And then what is it that you can work and outsource with a good professional team to support you? And then you just moderate and adjust as you go along and hire more people and fill those gaps as you go along. That's from a family discussion perspective to pragmatically sort of bring it off the ground. Then on the other front, I'm on the sort of MES EDB family office work group. So on the regulator's perspective, what happened in 2019 before the whole COVID crisis, at that juncture, the regulators sort of brought a bunch of us together from the industry to say, look, we have had a certain number of years of good traction. And at that time, the growth was about 3 times. And they were thinking, what kind of ecosystem do we need to build in order to ensure that these young family offices that have come into being are able to anchor their roots and grow and do well? And the difficulties a lot of those sort of quick to start up family offices face was that even if they wanted to professionalize, to hire the right professional into the family office wasn't that easy. And Anthony has mentioned that earlier, because if you want that multifaceted, multidimensional person, you don't want to hire like a whole team of 10. You want to hire like 2 persons to do all these multi-dimensional roles. That particular person would probably be extremely experienced and would have been in industry for a very long time, whether coming from the tax, legal, or an investment, asset management front. They would be very senior and very expensive. So to hire these people and to promise them a sensible career, and it's not just the cost, you might be prepared to pay them, but if you cannot show them that they have a good career prospects in front of them, that's not going to implode just because, you know, there is no governance in place and the family members just might act out of emotions and they're completely dysfunctional in the way they make decisions, and that professional can't come in to do the things that he does best outside. He's not going to be willing to give up his good career to come in. So what then the industry then looked at was, you know, if I have to combine it all, what is actually pragmatic as a first entry point, and what kind of skill sets do we need to train the industry so that there are more people available for family office to hire? And what we then looked at was that we started to roll out through Wealth Management Institute as well as a Singapore Management University Academy to roll out family office advisor programs where, you know, that person might start off with, let's say, investment expertise, but he does not have any wealth planning expertise, tax expertise, operational expertise. Sort of build programs where that particular person might have one or 2 very strong areas that they're very comfortable with, to give them an exposure and awareness in the other aspects. So they have a functional expertise for them to know, who do I look out for, which are the Anthonys and Crystals of the world, where are the professionals that I can find to work with me to fill what I'm not so strong at, so that that particular person can be a orchestrator within the family office, do his part that he's very good at, and to bring in other people to work together with him. And over time, because he has that awareness and that sort of high level functional information, to then build on that area so that in the future, you can bring other people to support them better. So from a Singapore perspective, that's you know, what we are actually doing to sort of upscale the ecosystem.
Okay. And you know, there's a comment here. It's not a question, but an anonymous attendee, I think it's addressed to Vincent. It says, it is really important not to ignore the governance mechanism on the family business system. Who can join the family business and who will be eligible to become the next CEO? I think those are the 2 most important questions all family businesses have to structure to anticipate. I have a question touching with the location of either Hong Kong or Singapore for family offices. How confidential are the dealings and investments and ownerships of family offices in these jurisdictions? Does anybody know those details? I know it's a very technical legal thing, but I'm sure you've come across that issue.
Just to clarify, so Miguel, are you saying who owns the family office? How confidential is it? Is that what you mean?
Yes. Yes, you mentioned that countries all over the world came to Hong Kong and dealt with you to open up family offices. So I think the questions of the people outside Hong Kong going to Hong Kong is how confidential is whatever I do or how I set up the family office in Hong Kong compared to Singapore. That's obviously one of the considerations.
I can touch on the Singapore bit, but I think it's largely the same to some extent. When you look at you know, setting up a family office from a structuring perspective, and you want it to be confidential, then it's a question of how you organize your ownership. So if you want to preserve confidentiality, so let's say if I set up a family office in Singapore and I went to Accra, you know, and I just incorporated a Singapore company. So if I do a Singapore incorporation, then the ownership and the directorship is public. So for people who wants to sort of ensure that, well, I need a Singapore company to operate as my family office, but I don't really want people to know who are the shareholders of the family office, then we might have to consider some level of ownership structuring, as what Anson's family has done. In his case, they used a unit trust, but your ownership of your family office, then you could then put in offshore companies, or you can allow the shares of the family office to be owned by a trust structure, or some other planning technique to ensure that there is some level of confidentiality in relation to who owns it. So I think there are different techniques to do it depending on what level of confidentiality the family is trying to achieve.
Maybe I can just add to that. I think, Miguel, it depends on who you're trying to keep your privacy from. So I think in this day and age, it's extremely difficult to hide the ultimate beneficial owner if you're going to be investing into assets that need to be custodied with a financial institution, right? So, I think everyone's familiar with CRS and now CFC in certain places. If you're going to hold any type of publicly traded or even OTC in the secondary market assets that you can't custody at home, then there's always going to be risk that somebody will know about it. But if you're worried about the general public knowing about what you own, of course, as Lee pointed out, there are many ways to create structures that would shield you. And so, with professionals, they will come up with a bespoke solution for you. Specifically on your question about Hong Kong versus Singapore, maybe I'll just share one trend that we're seeing. I think we keep focusing on a family office setup as if it's a single jurisdiction. I think most sophisticated family offices, whether they're the first generation or fourth or fifth generation, they are very, very global, very worldly, and they already have beachheads in different countries and jurisdictions. Sometimes it's because different generations of family members have migrated to different countries. Sometimes it's really to diversify their risk. So maybe in the current generation, one son is in Hong Kong, one son is in Singapore, one son is in the US, and they're building their own families. So I think what you're going to find is increasingly, as family offices become more sophisticated in terms of dealing with whether it's a tax environment or regulatory environment, and also getting access to much more localized investment opportunities, whether it's real estate or in private investments, you're going to find that people will maybe base their original family office infrastructure in where the country of origin is for the family, but they would happily set up a satellite family office in Hong Kong or Singapore. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that developing. And I guess specifically for Crystal and myself, the type of platforms that we operate facilitate that. So you don't need to replicate the full infrastructure in a place like Hong Kong or Singapore. You can just effectively leverage what we have to deliver certain parts of the infrastructure you need, and the rest of it that you want to build for privacy reasons, otherwise you build it yourself. So I think we're going to see more of that trend.
Yeah, I was referring to keeping it away from reporters and the public, because I see a lot of, Forbes lists where they have researchers do nothing but find out how much does Mr. Ho have in Hong Kong, even though he's a resident of, Indonesia, and I think a lot of families will want that to be private. Right. And they also report on, oh, this is the whole family, and but this particular guy owns 30%. I mean, that shouldn't be public. I don't think they want that to be public.
Yeah.
Mike speaking here. I just would like to, if I may, give a question from a PBEC perspective as well, to the panelists. One is, we have obviously Dixon on the panel today, but Lee and Anthony and Kristen and Anson in particular, when it comes to current policy for the industry, is there anything that you still wish the policymakers would listen to you about, that you would like to see happen sooner rather than later, that's holding you back in some way, or you're very happy at the moment with how the industry is growing, regionally speaking? Maybe Lee, you want to go first?
For me, I think the regulators here in Singapore have been very, very supportive for the industry. So not a great deal, except for I guess if I want to, push them a little bit, I'm not sure whether people are aware of this Variable Capital Company Act that came into force very recently, and it's basically a segregated fund structure regime that came into force here in Singapore to sort of provide a structuring tool for the industry to create fund structures. So we have seen a fair amount of interest from families to use it, but because the regulators are fairly cautious on the front of this very new creature, at the moment, the only fund managers that are allowed to use it are licensed fund managers. They're regulated by MAS. There are some talks about opening up slowly to allow family offices to be able to use such a structure, but it is not in place yet. So on a wish list, I would then like to see that at some juncture, when this is possible for family offices to use, and it gives them more flexibility, especially for families that want to sort of corporatize the structure a little bit. They may have multi-family branches, and they may want to use a segregated fund structure for each family's interest to be represented by various segregated funds. So that could be interesting for them. So at the moment, it is still not completely available, although there's some talks about it. And I think from the structuring perspective, at the moment, unlike in Hong Kong, I think Singapore trust laws, we still have a trust period of 100 years, which when you think about long-term intergenerational legacy, a pool of shared funds that's managed by a family office for multi-generations, then you will find the ownership structuring aspects, you would need to look offshore, because if you have a Singapore trust structure that lasts for 100 years and the assets are managed by the family office for multi-generations, Vincent's mom is already crossed 100, so the trust structure wouldn't last and provide for the families for very long. So I think that's another aspect that I hope the regulators would look at, to sort of remove the perpetuity period to make it more sensible for intergenerational planning.
Okay.
I just, COVID has changed travel patterns, and for financial investments, of course, you can do it on any desktop, but for other investments like investment in hotels, real estate, you really need to travel to do the due diligence. And sometimes it's tough to recruit expat talent when they cannot come in. So the problem is, China pursues a zero COVID policy for public health. Hong Kong seemed to be adhering to that very strictly, and for good reason, because we need the tourism from China. But at the same time, Hong Kong is an international financial center, and that's a big problem. And if, for instance, COVID and the pandemic lasts for another couple of years, I may have to relocate outside of Hong Kong. And then the family office would have to move. I just want to give you a personal example of the type of knock-on effects that we have with COVID and the travel restrictions and the quarantine and so on.
Yeah, I think we have both license in Hong Kong and Singapore, so we practice in both jurisdiction, to say. And many times the clients come to us and ask whether we should set up a family office or start the operation in Hong Kong or Singapore. Sometimes I think, for general speaking, the regulations or the typical financial service provided in both locations are pretty much very similar. And if it comes to the confidentiality or how we're gonna structure in a better way to protect information for the family, that really depends on ownership for the family office setup itself, like Lee just shared. If they want to custodian their assets with the family office that we have, it's in a good hands that we can shatter most of their things under our structure as well. And of course, this, like I said, I mentioned earlier on, the family office business or industry is still still early, especially in Hong Kong, and when we close to mainland China for this first and second generation of Chinese ultra high net wealth. And for the regulation itself, right now we have more, there's already tax benefits for single family office in Singapore, and the tax and the support from Hong Kong, Invest Hong Kong as well. And with the more newcomer joining this industry, we do see there's a trend for rising up new family office, new players from different kind of financial sectors. I think I want to bring a little bit, to the regulation itself and say, I think we're trying to improve on more self-regulation. As when we first started in Hong Kong, we started applying for the license, trying to give the, how we running the office in the compliance in a transparent way. And of course, for running a multi-family office, we are making money. It's for business operation. It's how we set up a more, a operation, a profit, a business model, how with less conflict interest with the clients, or more in a transparent disclosure with the conflict interest with the clients. I think that's the thing that we're working on it, and also the business integrity and ethics in the family office operation is extremely important. What we see, especially for the young family offices, or people are looking for a family office when you just start a few years. And especially, when family office, the startup family office, when they're facing the test of market cycles, or so a lot of challenge during the the market, and misrepresenting during the marketing, and also pressure from the business expansion and the self-discipline. I think that's the side that we as a family office want to improve for ourselves. And the regulation is yet to be completed, and the industry is fast growing in Asia right now. I think we do see for internal governance, it's coming as extremely important as a family office running ourselves, as one of the market player for ourselves.
Miguel, may I reply to Crystal on
Sure.
It was just interesting you talk about self-regulation. Obviously, Anthony's mentioned earlier about ESG, the importance of ESG reporting from a public entity's point of view. But with Dixon on the line, do you feel with COP26 now and sort of the starting gun has been fired, as John Kerry mentioned, is it that ESG is the benchmark that could be applied maybe mandatorily by the regulators to family office sector, for instance, who are doing a lot of the financial investments the same as traditional banks who have to adhere to ESG anyway? Are you guys willing to follow ESG if it was mandatory? I guess some of you are already doing it voluntarily.
Yeah, I think definitely we're trying to do it voluntary. It's not a mandatory requirement from our client, but with the ESG themes on top of most of the the governments and the corporate investor in the long-term priority, and the investment strategy has been adjusted a lot to to cater for the ESG into our portfolio management. And of course, for running our office itself, I think when G stands for the governance, it's really important for investment governance, for the corporate itself, risk management, and also for the sustainability of the family office. Development itself. It's the thing that we look into a lot. For we're actually trying to report to our clients how because we are part of the listed company right now, so we are actually reporting and how we run a family office into our clients, and trying to show a more transparent in terms of the governance of our own company.
Yeah, just a quick one from myself. I think our platform's been PRI compliant for a decade. So the same value system that people espouse under ESG, we already have that across all of our investments, from liquid to private side. So I think it's great that it's gone mainstream. It's probably going to be a dominant component of people's investment checklist if there are gatekeepers. So certainly it's something that's, I think, already in progress, Michael. It's not something that's still on the fringes. It's mainstream.
I have one question that relates to tax. Hello? Oh, sorry. I think we're out of time. And I'd like to just point out that the next session is at 5 o'clock. It's the future of blue economy. Please join us and watch that at 5 o'clock Hong Kong time. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for the panelists.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Contact you
Thank
a
you.
little bit later.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.